Hello and good morning. How do you produce a transformation for yourself in your relationship to your tasks, your time, and your calendar? That's the mission that we're on here at the Task Management and Time Blocking Virtual Summit 2021. And thank you for appearing on Saturday morning. This is Francis Wade, and we are on the final leg of our journey together. And if you're hearing me, you know the routine. Drop a note in the chat. Let me know how you're doing this morning. And if my volume is at the right level, if you're hearing me, I'm not seeing any comments yet. Does that mean that you're not hearing me? Oh, okay, there we go. Hi, Nicole. Hi, Heather. Volume and video perfect. Thank you, guys. It's the stalwarts who are here on the Saturday morning. And great. Well, let's jump right into what we're all about today, because today is, I gotta tell you, we have something interesting coming up. If you were here last night during the end of our session, or anytime during our closing session last night, you heard a few things. But let's go through the changes that came up in the schedule for today. I'll just go through from beginning to end and highlight some different things that are happening for the day. So we are now in the opening session. I'll be bringing Ray up in just a moment to help me transition into the next stage, where he's actually going to be interviewed by Ami Devereaux, he and Nicole Shamblin. So he and Nicole are both presenters. Ami is a presenter, and she's going to be asking them questions and going through a Q&A with them. That's at 11:30. And at 12:30, so here's the sort of the big kahuna for the day, the big surprise. So we have, if you've not heard, a group of high school task management app developers. And if you've not seen their video, you need to see it. It's available in today's downloads, and I've been sharing it around different lists in the Mighty Taskers community, different places, so folks can get a sense of really what they're about. And yesterday I played about a minute or 2 minutes in the closing session, and people were asking for more based on the 2 minutes that they saw, or 1 minute that they saw. And the video is, I'll just recommend that you go watch the video before they come on at 12:30. I don't want to take anything away from what Nicole, Ray, and Ami are doing, but that may really pin you to the screen, because it's going to be interesting. This is an interesting group of sophomore high school students. Okay. So when they're done at 1:30, we are actually going to go into something that's not scheduled on the agenda that you're looking at. We're going to go into a lunchtime networking session. That's going to go for an hour. We're going to do a whole room reset. We're going to come out of presentation mode, go into networking mode. Actually, we're going to do the reset, and then we're going to come back in about 5 minutes later into networking mode. So I'm inviting you to bring your lunch and just come and hang out, and we're just going to be chatting until 2:30, when the panel on the future of task management with Dan Markovitz, Augusto Pinot, and Julie Bestry will begin. That'll be 2:30 to 3:15, thereabouts, or right up until the bottom of the hour at 3:30. So that's a change. Right there I have Gabriela Brazil. She's not able to make it today, and Augusto Pinot is replacing her. And then between 3:30 and 4:15, we'll have another Q&A, second to last one. It'll be moderated by, I'm going to check my list so I don't make any mistakes, our own Ray Sidney Smith, returning for really Herculean duty today on Saturday of the summit. And he'll be interviewing Ami and Trevor, facilitating them. Once again, they're speakers, and their content is available in the set of downloads for today. And then the final Q&A is going to be conducted by Julie Bestry with Olga Colmenares and Jim McCullen. That'll take place at 5 o'clock and go until 6. So at 6 o'clock, we'll have our closing session. This will be our grand goodbye, or farewell, sayonaras, so long, farewell, I'll be the and all the rest of it. But we really want it to be an opportunity to bring closure to what we have been doing for the last 3 days. Our presenters have worked really, really hard to pull this off. and we want to give them a big thank. And we want also to thank you or attendees or summiteers. Julie says, I didn't know we are having a musical session today. Actually, we're going to probably chip in with some music during lunchtime. So be prepared. Prepare yourself for it. Not singing, though. No. Um, but we want you to bring the day to closure in an effective way by acknowledging everyone who has participated and contributed to making the last 3 days a success. 2 days so far, and I'm anticipating that the third day will be a bit interesting. Trust me. As I said yesterday, somewhere in that group in the Conducian team, those high schoolers, there's a Bill Gates in there, there's a Mark Zuckerberg in there, there's some Elon Musk maybe, there's some kind of genius lurking, and it could be in the waters in San Francisco where they're from. I don't know. We'll find out during the interview when Ray asked them maybe some pointy questions. High school sophomores, guys. In case anybody is wondering, I mentioned this yesterday. We heard from Jamie Steele. For those of you who are fans of Jamie, she would normally be here. She is actually recovering from an illness, recovering well. So the good news is that she's getting better. But the bad news is that we won't have her here today. And if you have not been into the community, I'm going to ask you to definitely make a trip today. Presenters. They've done together a swag bag of freebies. So these are free downloads, free resources that you can find in the community. They're on the Summit Spaces link. And if you've never been to the community before, you need some help, when you go in, there's a welcome post. If that doesn't do it for you, go to the help desk and get some help in navigating the Mighty Taskers community. Okay. They've also offered some items for sale in the store. So there's a Summit store and there's also a Summit swag bag. The store involves spending a little bit of money. The swag bag involves all freebies. Okay. In addition to those two, there's also a library, which I just updated this morning. And the library has all kinds of resources of the list of apps that you can use for time blocking and auto scheduling. And there's also in addition to the library, there's a group of interactive apps or games that you can also play. They're meant for your learning. That's also in the Summit Spaces. And then finally, there's a discussion area. So not many people have been dropping discussions, but the truth is, once we're finished at, say, 7 o'clock today with our networking session at the end of the evening, you'll have an opportunity to keep interacting and keep engaging in the Mighty Taskers community. So that's our future. Our future is the Mighty Taskers community. So you could wait until the summit is over if you're someone who likes live events, and wait until the summit is over and then go to the Mighty Taskers community. But I recommend that you actually go there before. Create an account if you don't have one, but log into the discussion area, the discussion lounge for the summit. Okay, just get going. In other words, let's get the wheels going for our ongoing communication in the area of task management and time blocking. So this evening, we'll have the closing session. It'll run for about 20 minutes, been on average. And then we'll have an open networking session for you to bounce around, say goodbye, say thank you, say farewell. I'll also open up a guest book. And the reason for the guest book is I want to capture all of the juicy good things that you have to say about the summit. Don't worry, we're going to be sending a survey where we capture all the things that weren't so good. So we're going to get both, but we're going to have a guest book. And the reason we do that is to sort of, at the very moment of departure, just before you leave, to ask you, what would you say to recommend the summit to other people? And we capture that all in one huge file, and then we're able to share it. Great. And Lyndon has just dropped a link to the link map, and it has everything all on one page that you could find here at the summit. I could actually drop a picture of that. Thanks for that, Lyndon. Let me just drop a picture of it in case folks have not seen that. This is like your everything in one place map of all at the summit, all of the locations of all of the content in the summit. came as a result of some recommendations that we got in the middle of the summit last year. Turned out to be so useful. Okay, let me see if there are any questions. Guys, drop some questions in the chat. I'm just going to see what the comments were so I didn't miss anything. Hi, Cams. How are you? Guyana. Brett was asking for the links. Up at 5:45 this morning. I don't sing. Mr. Surprise presentation of networking. Schedule something else. Back at 2:30. Okay, Trevor, gotcha. Trevor, if you want the link, I can drop you the link. You can watch the link. You can watch the video sometime later today with the kids. Not the live, but the other one, the one that they pre-recorded. So they delivered their video, by the way, on Thursday morning at 2:30 a.m. from San Francisco. Okay, give you an idea of what they're like. Just a little peek. Nancy's asking, when will the last management begin? When will the task management begin? Not understanding your question, Nancy. What's the beginning? What's the beginning that you're pointing to? While you clarify that question, let me bring up my colleague, Ray Sidney Smith. Oh, I'm not seeing Ray. Oh, I'll have to do some texting. Or if someone can find Ray on Telegram, could you just ask him, hey, Ray, where are you? Nancy's asking, is this a course? Oh, okay. I think, Nancy, this might be your first time here. So let me explain what you've landed inside of. So you're at you're at a virtual conference, and this is the third day. Great. Okay. And let me drop the graphic of all the different locations you can visit real quick. And there are three kinds of locations in this particular virtual conference. There are the live activities, which you're in the middle of right now. There's also pre-recorded content, and there are about 10 videos from yesterday and another 10 videos from today. If you click on that graphic, let me grab the Start Here page, because you're going to need that in order to attend each of those. The pre-recordeds from yesterday expire at lunchtime today. The pre-recorded for today expire at lunchtime tomorrow on Sunday. Answer that question. Let me grab the Start Here page. Folks, I think Ray is trying to reach me. Okay, here we go. So here's the link to that graphic, the peach graphic I just dropped in. Great. Nancy, the link I'm adding is the way for you to navigate all of the three locations that make up our summit for the last 3 days today. So like I said, you're in the one in the bottom left. If you click on the graphic, it'll fill up your screen so you can see the fine print. That's the one in the bottom left-hand corner that says live Q&As and speeches on Remo. The one on the right takes you to the pre-recorded content, which you can stream. And right at this moment, there are 10 videos from yesterday and about 10 videos from today, thereabouts in terms of the numbers. And there's also an online community that basically keeps us all together. That will continue after the summit is over. And you can reach that by clicking in the top left-hand corner of that graphic at the link that I just dropped. I hope that makes some sense to you, Nancy. Let me know if that makes sense. Okay, Ray's being held up and he's going to be here in a few. Let me take some more questions. What time tomorrow? Around lunchtime, about 12. I usually add a little more time after 12 Eastern time. Linda? And today's pre-recorders go away at lunchtime today. Again, after 12, I usually leave a little extra time until about 1 o'clock. Other questions? All right, if no questions, let's for those of you who, even if you were there yesterday, and you're here today, um, and if you weren't here today, why don't we share a few of the things that have opened up for us? So certain things occurred to you yesterday when you were in the heat of, listening to a session or watching a download or in a conversation with someone. So what are some of the things that you've discovered or have opened up for you in terms of new insights, new nuggets that you're taking away? Let's do a quick recap, not recap in the sense that you repeat what you said yesterday if you were here, but what are you seeing now? What's present for you in terms of, here's what something I'm learning that I'm taking away for the next year, because it'll be another year before we get together again in a format like this, guys. And then I want to ask you a question. So what are you taking away? What nuggets have you gleaned? What insights have you, I won't say created, but have you discovered? Takes a moment for the fingers to get going and for the brain to get warmed up. It is Saturday morning, for that coffee to kick in. No one is allowed to put anything they put yesterday. Thanks, Julie. I tend to think of our productivity people as being very geeky, and my wife tells me that we are very, very, very geeky. And the truth is, we care a lot, right? We wouldn't be here if we didn't care about our productivity and we didn't care about some level of results that are tricky to accomplish if you just kind of go along with the way life is every day. So, we're eager for results, and at the same time, we are kind of geeky about the producing the results. And at the same time, we have our humor. Thanks for reminding us. Great. Andrew says, know when you're most productive and match your tasks accordingly. Say some more about that, Andrew, in terms of, are you thinking in terms of energy during the day? Are you thinking of the term for the energy during the day is, just drawing a blank. Energy during the day. Okay, great. So there's a chronotype. Thank you. Thank you. So there's a rhythm that you have during the day in terms of when you do your best work. And I remember last night, some were saying that they do their best work very late at night, and there's some that do their best work early in the morning, and adjusting your schedule accordingly. Ultradian rhythm. Thanks, Brett. That's the one that I was kind of drawing a blank on. And interestingly, so my ultradian rhythms have shifted, and I'll tell you how. I have started since about 6 months ago, waking up in the middle of the night. No, this used to happen infrequently, very infrequently. Maybe once in a few years ago, it happened once in a blue moon. Now it's happening every night. And I thought, oh my God, I'm stressed. But it's not stress. I did a little research, and here's what I found. The word insomnia was invented about 100 years ago. And before the word insomnia was invented, people never had a problem with not sleeping at night. Why? Because they would wake up in the middle of the night and they would read, they would do housework, they would cook, they would do chores, they would do all kinds of things in the middle of the night. And it was understood that it was accepted that you would do these things in the middle of the night and then go back to sleep. And this two phases of sleep with something in between said this was the norm. And then a psychologist invented the term insomnia about 100 years ago. And all of a sudden it became a problem that you can't sleep through the night. So as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, because this is one of those psychological objects. Insomnia is a psychological object. And until it was named, it wasn't a problem, and it's become a problem. And what the person was saying in the article is that all you're doing is listening to your body if you find that you need 2 phases of sleep. And what you should do is get up, do something that taxes your mind, because it's your mind that really needs to go back to sleep if you want it to. And don't make it something that's too interactive. So don't get on the phone and start talking to a friend. Engaging in social media, I found, is too active for me. So what I did was I grabbed out my old Kindle. So I have an old Kindle, one of the old ones with the kind of the gray screen. So it's not one of those bright blue screens. I have one of those as well, but I grabbed up my old one, downloaded a bunch of books, and now I have a routine that at around 1:30 to 2, I get up for around a half an hour to an hour. I read, and then it puts me back to sleep. And to talk about matching energy with time, this is exactly what the article recommended you do. And now that I've started doing it, what do you think the result has been? No guilt, no, not a feeling that there's something wrong, I need to fix a problem. And in fact, the second phase of sleep is extremely restful. It's also very dreamy. I'm having lots of dreams in that second phase that I don't have in the first phase. And I'm waking up more refreshed than I was before. So I saw some comments in the chat. Let me see what's. Oh, there's even a book. Oh, hang on a minute. Okay, so I'm reading what you guys are saying. Julie said, oh, she was sharing about something different. Amazing. People used to wake, sleep, wake. There was naturally bifurcated chronoculture, but the need for a full night's sleep began with the additional prescribed workday in the Industrial Revolution. People needed to alter their natural sleep habits to be at work for 10 hours in a row. So this is artificial. Wow. And look at that. Brett has dropped a link in the chat. Humans used to sleep in two shifts. So I can't click on it and read it now, right? It wouldn't be the right thing to do, but I'm looking anyway. Oh my goodness. This is not the article I read. But to answer Andrew's question, I've just found it by accident, and I recommended it to someone else, a couple of people. And there's a book about it. And there's another link about it. Okay, so here's the story. Next year for the time blocking summit, a task management and time blocking summit, I'm going to bring someone on to talk about polyphasic sleep, or whatever the fancy name is for this particular behavior. Okay, that's my commitment to you. But here's the other question I have for you. I'm also considering bringing on next year, or creating next year, a special. We don't really have tracks here with the task management and time blocking virtual conference, but I'm thinking of doing a theme on getting things done. And I think it'd be appropriate because sometime this year, will mark the 20-year anniversary of the first edition. And I thought, how appropriate. Why don't we have a theme or an area or a point of focus for getting things done, just to acknowledge some of the hard work that David Allen, of course, and others have done in the last couple of decades. And of course, in our style, we'll look at the challenges of DTD and we'll look at addressing them, because we're all about, how can we make a difference and cause a transformation in the lives of our summiteers. So we'll probably take that slant. But what do you think of the idea, guys? Let me know in the chat. Brett says, yeah, he likes the idea. Brett double likes the idea. Great. There's actually a talk today at 5 o'clock. Jim McCullen, he is a GTD expert, a GTD person. Ray loves it. Ray, I'm just going to bring you up so that we can introduce you in the next session. Second. So I'm going to bring you up on stage, Ray, and then make our transition to the next session. Because GTD was the very first book that I'm aware of that laid out task management as a process, building on all of the process management kinds of work and TQM and all of that took place in the 80s. Linda is asking, is there a break from live at 1:15 today? Is that still correct? 1:15 today. We're going to have a lunch. I'm going to open up a networking room, Linda. So there won't be anything broadcast live, but we'll be in the networking room for about an hour, just having lunch with each other. So the room will be open for networking, but there's nothing offered until 2:30 Eastern time. Okay. So between 1:30 and 2:30 Eastern time, there is nothing being offered in terms of a presentation. There'll only be networking. Okay, Linda says, yep, GTD is the anchor. Great, Ray, how are you?
Hi there, how's it going? It's been a productive morning.
Good. So far, what do you think of the idea of a GTD theme for next year's summit? That's all you give me 3
Yeah, I
thumbs
think
up.
I think as a,
Not the whole summit, but a sub.
yeah, as a GTDer myself, I think that it's really important to always be kicking the tires on the system and introducing people to even just one concept within getting things done, as David Allen proffers in his books and his work. I think is both a testament to his life's work, but also so useful to so many people. You know, if people just get just one nugget from any of those pieces. They don't need to practice GTD as a whole even, but just one little nugget can be really transformational in the way in which they operate both in life and work. And good morning, Linda. How's it going? Good morning to everybody.
Great. So we'll get some great speakers in to focus on the points where people would get the biggest benefit from. And just before we switch over to the Q&A that's coming up next with me and Nicole, let me just turn off the recording for the morning. So guys, before I switch over, let me just thank you all for being here for the morning session. I know it's Saturday morning. Oh my goodness. Let's turn off the recording and switch over. Okay, here we go. So let me bring me and Nicole up for the first Q&A. Guys, I hope you listen to their videos. Nicole did double duty and she offered 2 videos for us. Great. Good morning, Nicole. Morning, Ami.
Morning.
Hello, everybody.
Great. So with that, let me disappear and hand over to you, Ami, and then I'll start the recording.
All right. So welcome to the morning session. And I am really delighted to be the moderator for the 2 of you. I did watch both videos, although I have to say I didn't watch them entirely because I couldn't find the time to watch them both. I had something really funny happen with yours, Ray. So I'm watching your video and I use Evernote. And as I'm watching the video, I'm going, man, I clearly don't know how to use this thing because I have never seen any of these features, options, functions. It doesn't even look the same. And I watched like 40 minutes of your video and then took a break because I knew the session was starting, at which point I opened Evernote and there's an update waiting for me. I update Evernote, which is a huge update, like they completely altered the entire UI. And I discover it looks just like what you were doing. So now I have to go back and restudy it with the proper version. But hopefully everybody listening today has updated Evernote. And if you haven't, hurry up and do that. So, all right. Thank you so much for being here, Nicole and Ray. If you guys haven't watched their video, I highly encourage you to do so. Watch them both with a pen and paper because there is a ton of content in each of them. So the first thing I want to do is give both of you an opportunity to give us all a little summary of what your video and what your focus is, because many people have not watched them yet and won't get to them until after hearing this. So we need to both do an advertisement and give them all the context of your video so that when they watch it, they can get all the benefit. So let's start with you, Nicole. If you would go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a sort of 5 to 10 minute overview of your video and what you're focusing on.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for having me. Always excited to share and connect with my peeps, and Ray, it's nice to share this space with you also. So my name is Nicole Chamblin. I am a productivity coach and trainer. I am based now in the Northern Virginia area, but I got my start climbing the ladder in New York City advertising and marketing agencies. And that was really the first place where I realized how important it is for us to have healthy habits and good systems when we're working. Even if you by yourself have that, if the others around you don't, then it can really make things crazy. And so that was my introduction into the world of really having to make sure that I was managing my workload in a way that was effective. Going down the rabbit hole of productivity 15 plus years later, I started my business and really started looking at not only how can I improve my own productivity, how can I help others? And so throughout the work, one of the things that I've realized is that it's not just about tools. It's not just about, technology, although I love a good gadget and an app any day of the week. And that absolutely makes a difference. But with many of my clients, what I realized was if their habits weren't right, then it didn't matter what tool they were using. And I think many of us in the summit can agree with that, where it's about how you use the systems that you have, how you use your tools and your resources. So a lot of my work focuses not much on the technology aspect of things as much as what's happening in the 4 inches between our ears. What are the mindset shifts that we need to do in order to be more productive? How are our habits impacting us? So as Francis said, I was a little extra and gave you guys 2 pre-recorded videos because I wanted to approach this from 2 different mindsets. And so the first is stop habit blocking your productivity. And in that, I pulled from the book that I launched last year, which is The Full Plate Detox, which is directed towards sheroes who are constantly busy and need to get back to the top of their priority list. And I focused on the negative mindsets and habits that typically come up and that I've seen when working with my shero clients that impact their productivity. And so the first session really looks at what are some of those things that we need to watch out for, because they affect how we work, they affect the way that we approach our projects, they affect the way that we actually go through and engage in the day, not just with the work that we're doing, but with others. And so we can dig into that a little bit as we go. The second session is about project management and moving beyond task management. And that for me really went right back to the heart of my advertising days, where we were constantly juggling, different productions, different clients, whether you were doing their TV creative, their, production schedule for their upcoming launch of a promotion. And so there were always very large projects that were happening, oftentimes under one larger umbrella. And so if you get into the mindset of just task management, then it's like getting on that hamster wheel and just constantly running and trying to check everything off your list. And so what I learned to do in order to be effective is that I had to really pull it back and always think big picture. And it brings me back to that concept that folks talk about. You have to be able to plan the forest and count the trees. And so if you look at it from a overall project management view, then you're able to really think about what are all the things that I have to have in place, what are my resources, what are my skills, and then get into the task management. So I went back to the Project Management Institute. They have the project management body of knowledge areas. There are 10 different ones. And I just try to understand them and always look at how those different areas affect the projects that I'm working on. My disclaimer is I am not a project management professional. I don't have the certification. I don't intend to do it, but you can still gain a lot of insight and apply the techniques and recommendations to how you run your projects to be more efficient. So that's the 2 different sessions that I've got for you in this summit.
Terrific. And we will get a little bit more into depth in both of them. And then Ray, if you would also do the same. I mean, I know many, many people in the summit, of course, know you, but let's assume some of them don't. So if you would go ahead and introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background and tell us about this particular video that you have submitted.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Ray Sidney Smith. By day, I am the CEO of a small company that helps economic development agencies provide digital marketing and productivity technology training to small businesses throughout the United States. And so I spend most of my time educating small businesses about how to be more productive. And in my spare time, I spend all of it with you all in the productivity community, talking about productivity on podcasts and webinars and all kinds of other fun things. And I'm currently running an Evernote masterclass. It's free to attend live, and it covers 3 different areas of kind of experience with Evernote, going from beginner to intermediate to advanced. And so I thought with this summit, I would talk a little bit about how to make notes actionable within Evernote. And of course, these are applied in many different areas, but I wanted to show some of the features that Evernote has and its capabilities through that. And I tried to bulk these ideas into 3 areas and then give 3 tips for each of those areas. And so what I did was I bulked them into capturing, organizing, and taking action. And how do you make notes more actionable? And in essence, I created the ABCs. I had the ABCs in my first book, so I decided to create another set of ABCs under capture, which is always be capturing. There is this great functionality within Evernote for us to be able to capture content on an ongoing basis, and we can't organize, we can't measure what we can't manage. And so the idea here is to capture that content. We can always toss it afterward, but capturing is that primary first process. I then talked about the idea of connecting notes. And this is not to get overly complex with the process of connecting notes, but a lot of people don't understand that you are actually capable of linking from one note to the next. And this very powerful feature then creates an ontology within the ecosystem that is the Evernote platform. And now you can go from one note to the next with the click of a button, with the click of a link. And just think about that, going from a one-to-one relationship with your knowledge to a many-to-many relationship with the knowledge that you have within Evernote. I then talked about always be consolidating, right? And this comes back to the always be capturing. If you're putting all of that stuff into Evernote, some of it is refuse, and some of it needs to be kind of like your hard drive on your computer. It needs to be defragmented. We need to go through and do some level of maintenance and cleanup of that process. So we talked about always be capturing, always be connecting, and then ultimately always be consolidating, connecting them together to what I call a knowledge unit, something that is more powerful than a singular note. It is the combination of several notes together that then becomes one note that makes it easier for me to filter and then find that specific piece of knowledge that I'm looking for in the future. We then talk about organizing. Organizing is really all about naming, tagging, and structuring notes effectively. We want to be able to make consistency among those pieces. So for example, I make the very, I guess, from my perspective, it seems that not many people talk about this, but I like to have consistency across my entire system. So my calendars, my folders, both in the cloud and locally, my email folders, what I call labels, because that's what Gmail calls them. So Gmail, both in Google Workspace, the formerly known as G Suite, and in Gmail, the consumer brand product, those are all going to be the same with my notebooks, stacks, notebooks, and tags. They're going to be consistent because I want to be able to find things, not just find things, I want to be able to place things in the same buckets in no matter what tool I'm in. And that makes things, again, filtering and finding just becomes easier, but filing, filtering, and finding become easier by virtue of making that consistency across the board. So organizing is one of those very fundamental pieces to making notes more actionable within Evernote. And then finally, I talk about action. If you can't make notes actionable, then that's going to be really difficult. And this is where every meeting, every time you sit down and take notes, say you're here in the summit and you're watching this session, I hope you have Evernote or a note-taking app open and you're taking notes. And that's really important. Right after it, though, you need some debriefing time. You need a chance to be able to sit back and say, okay, what in here is a project or an action? You know what? Nicole said something really important about project management, and it's really powerful, and I want to be able to apply that in my world. Well, the moment you walk away from it and you don't look at it again, it becomes useless. It just becomes barnacle. I like to use ship analogies because rising tides lift all ships. We're all boats in the ocean, and we should be helping each other with those rising tides. And so barnacle on your ships is not good. And that stuff becomes barnacle if you don't scrape it off, if you don't cultivate it. Not that it isn't a living life form and those kinds of things, but some things are useful to us in life, and some things become less useful over time. And that's all that stuff if you're not dealing with it. So identify the projects and actions within every note that you take, and that makes it more actionable. Make each actionable an individual unit. I do not like the idea of having all of your stuff crammed into one place. And so in the current infrastructure, if you're going to use Evernote as a task management system, you need to have each note to fungible. You need to be able to make it an individual note, and that way you can tie reminders to them. You can put notes within the notes. That action note, you can basically put notes within the action note. And then finally, I close out the talk with talking about grouping like items, or at least grouping for efficiency and effectiveness. So we group like items based on resource availability, right? We have limited resources, time and location. We can group notes based on that. We can group notes based on things for efficiency. So like items, so calls, If we have to do errands, we can do those things a la GTD. We can create context for being able to do things more efficiently. I tend to work on a more project basis, so I don't do that, but that's okay. And then we can, of course, look to efficiency and effectiveness then. So we go from efficiency and we go to effectiveness. And effectiveness for me is really energy, mood, and then complexity and difficulty. And understanding that my energy and mood dictates many times what it is I'm going to do. And it does yours as well. You may not want to think about it that way, but your energy and mood has a profound impact on the way in which you work, and that really is dictated by your circadian rhythms and ultimately your ultradian rhythms. And so you can look those things up and figure out when and how your biological prime times work in your own world. But if we think about that from that perspective, then we can think, okay, what's complexity and difficulty? And complexity, of course, we go from simple to complex. Things that have more than one step becomes more complex, and then as we add individual steps beyond that, it becomes more and more complex. That is one level of what we can consider weight of a project or a task. And then we can flip that to difficulty, right? And difficulty is that which is easy to hard in perception to us, right? And how much effort, right? We can think about that from the perspective of effort. How much effort will go into doing that? One email is not the same as another. I might have to put in a lot of energy to write one email because my mood, energy, whatnot are not the same. So we think about it from that perspective. So I go through that process of capturing and then ultimately organizing and planning for action in the session. So hopefully that was a quick summary and gives us some jumping off points to talk about today.
It was a very quick summary, and I'm not sure that everybody can listen as fast as you talk, Ray. So
I'm a New Yorker. I'm sorry.
New York, I got you there, Ray, because New York, I followed that.
So what I want to do now is see if we can not only dig into what you both presented and the summaries you just gave us, but also connect them. And that's something that I think is really important in these sessions, is that you not end up just answering discrete questions about your own specific video, but that we look at some connections between the two and be able, for example, to take the insights that Nicole, you presented and see if we can tie them into some of the mechanics of how that gets done in Ray's presentation. All right. So, I mean, otherwise we end up just like having three talking heads that are sort of disconnected. So one of my first questions, and this is sort of a backtrack, is that I listened to both of you talk about needing to take a step back and do something like maintenance on the way that you iterate and plan and make decisions about what you're going to do and how you're going to do them in whichever respective system you're working. And one of the things that I think people who are entering this area of productivity will be asking, certainly I find myself asking it, and I've been in this world a long time, is how much time do you dedicate to the systems that manage what you intend to do? So you end up with a to-do or a task called maintaining the system. How much time do you spend on that, and how do you dedicate that time, and how do you think about it? Let me go back to you, Nicole.
So I would say the basic answer is it depends. It depends on how much effort have you already put into maintaining those systems and making sure that they're a good fit for where you are right now. One of the struggles that I see folks go through is that they think they're going to put a system in place and they'll never have to touch it again. And that's just not true. And I think that's some of what Ray was talking about, where you're going to be filtering, you're going to be connecting. If you just say something like Evernote, you're going to be having the opportunity to plug things one into the other. And so when I think about systems, you have to constantly use it. And as you're using it, it evolves. But if you're thinking about it holistically and you are always taking that step back. So I think about it as the helicopter view when you're rising above the forest to kind of make sure things are laid out the way you want it to be. Every now and then you've got to rise up to that level and take a look at it and say, does this still make sense? What's coming down the road, and will this system continue to support it? Right.
And Nicole, do you block time for that? Is
yeah.
there actually a time block on your calendar?
So that would fall into my admin time block, right? I pick the time of day and week. Usually I'll do my admin stuff. It's either Mondays or Fridays, where I'll have just a block of time where I'm going to go through my admin. And so there are going to be different things that rise up into that admin, whether it's, that's when I've got to go and make sure that all of my tasks are lined up. I've got to lay out a production schedule for upcoming videos, for example. Like, I have to make sure I am laying out the schedule. I'm looking at how things integrate, what makes sense. What am I going to task my VA with? What am I going to do myself? What do I need to key up as far as whether it's the web designer, et cetera? So I'm looking at my systems. I need that time to plan it out. So that's my planning time.
Okay. So
let me just jump right
in. Ray and get his feedback on this. Because Ray, as you both were talking and in your video, one of the thoughts I had is, my God, when in the world would I do all this merging of notes and tagging things? I mean, I tag notes as I take them, but it does look like a lot of work. So tell us how you think about that and how you approach it.
Yeah, sure. So it depends on the influx of data into your system is going to need to be matched with the amount of maintenance. In Dan Charnas's book, Work Clean, he talks about mise en place and how chefs have this concept of getting ready for working, and then cleaning up from the work they do. Any kitchen, any pastry environment, anything where you are making food, you need to make sure that it's clean for being able to do the work. You need to be able to make sure that you have all of your resources within hand's reach to be able to make that stuff happen. And then you need to be able to, on an ongoing basis or after the fact, clean up. Now, of course, if you're cleaning up along the way, it's going to be much easier to clean up at the end because you're doing some of that work. I'm a clean up as you go guy, right? My kitchen is spotless while I'm cooking, and it's just because I'm just a higher anxious person, I suppose. I just want everything cleaner as I'm making my way through the world, and so I like to do that cleanup along the way. I don't like the big bulk of stuff at the end, but you may be different, and that's okay. So I just say in the talk, especially, I just say use intuition here, which is past experience informing your present decisions, to be able to choose what it is that you do in terms of maintenance. But you do need to know how much maintenance time you have related to the influx of stuff, and that becomes a little bit more of a mathematical choice as opposed to oh my gosh, I need to set aside time every day that may or may not be time that you need to set aside every day. So I say track how much stuff you capture, and then divide and conquer. So if you know that every week you capture 50 items into your inbox or into your various systems, then you know how much time. There's probably a modal average for the amount of time that you spend doing those things. Now, again, a lot of this sounds like, oh gosh, I need to track my time. I need to be able to understand these things. Start with a guess, right? You can guesstimate a lot of these items and then ultimately determine whether or not your guesstimate is correct. I don't know whether you're lying to yourself, but you know whether you're lying to yourself. And so, if you say, what, I think I need about 2 to 3 hours. Let me choose that 6 days out of the week. I just set myself up with, little 30-minute blocks each of those days. And now I can go through my week and just do a little bit of cleanup. Then you find yourself with still excess stuff in your inbox at the end of the week. You need to add more time, right? So you don't need to be so scientific about it.
I mean, I think one of the things that many people, when they begin to utilize some kind of a system for their productivity beyond just having a to-do list and, doing whatever shows up in their calendar, is that they are, I really want us to speak also to the beginners, because when we talk to people in our own community, it's a very insular community of people who are already, as you described, Ray, high anxiety with a procrastinating kind of temperament, where we need to get things done to reduce our anxiety so that we have a beautiful mise en place and have everything in order. And I would gamble that almost everybody in this conference, or certainly all the presenters, fall into that group. But many, many people who are facing the chaotic incoming stuff and don't know how to get things done are going to listen to us and think we are all OCD. So, and maybe there is a component of that. So Nicole, when you talk to your own clients or to your own community and try to introduce them to some of these tools and ways of thinking, how do you do it for the beginner or the person who is facing the kind of chaos I'm describing?
I tell them to start small. One of the things I'll walk them through is just let's get a sense of what are your biggest stressors, right? What would help you the most if we were to put a system in place right now, right? And so looking at that, one of the things I'll do is just let's just get you in a time blocking habit. Let's get you, do you use a calendar? No? Okay, let's get you used to using a calendar and let's figure out what that is. So it depends on where they are, but it starts small. You're building a habit. And I think that's one of the things we have to remember, that what we're essentially talking about are the habits that we're creating around being productive. And so many of us will focus on the bad habit we have and give it a lot of energy. And this is one of the things that I talk about in the habit blocking. It's about building a habit. So start small. Where do I want to do? Okay, I want to get used to using my calendar. So the combination that you do is you start using whatever calendar system you're doing, but then maybe you're setting reminders for yourself so that there's something that's flagging you. I'm a huge believer in, using my alarms and using my reminders, because then I take the pressure off of my own brain to remember what I have to do. And so it can be, I want to start creating time blocks. Let me set my calendar out 2 to 3 weeks, keep it light so they're not going crazy and freaking out and saying this is my whole life. And then adjust as you go. You're not locked in. Adjust as you go.
So that makes sense to me, because like somebody like James Clear talks about how you build habits is you start with the smallest thing. You want to do 50 push-ups, you get up and you just do one and see how long you can do one. I actually used that after my shoulder surgery to get back up to 40 push-ups, because I could barely hold myself up when the surgery and the rehab was done. And Ray, I know you work with small business leaders, and certainly they are constantly facing a deluge of things they need to do. So how do you help them transition from working solely in the business to working on the business using the kind of tools you're describing?
Yeah, so I always talk about infrastructure with, while politicians tend to talk about infrastructure week a lot, I always talk about it in the business world as it's all about infrastructure. If we have systems within systems, every week is infrastructure week when you're dealing with startups. And then when I come into contact with business leaders who have been in business for 20 years, but they've not been profitable, then I go into infrastructure discussions with them as well, right? It's all about starting with oneself. Usually in a small business environment, if you have 20 people on staff, 50 people on staff, you are modeling for everyone else around you, even if you don't think you are. People are paying attention to what you're doing. And I consider this from an entrepreneurship perspective all the way up to an entrepreneurship perspective. Yeah. When you're in a business and you see other people being inefficient and ineffective, model effective, efficient behavior, and people will follow in small ways, and that will help. So I think we just get started with small business owners in terms of infrastructure. We tend to look at their systems and how they coordinate and organize, usually their time first, because they tend to, as you talked about in your own talk, Ami, people just tend to be so inefficient with the way in which they manage their calendars. And so if we can just figure those pieces out, then we can start to spread beyond that. So I usually start with calendar and see where they are in that capacity. That will really help unwind a lot of the other pieces that become consequences, positive and negative, of the way in which they work. I think of things in terms of space-time. Again, I think of productivity always in the scientific realm, maybe because I'm a sci-fi geek, but I always think about things in terms of space-time, which is that no time isn't connected to some space. Yeah. And routines then are representation of space-time. We do things every day, and we don't recognize that we do those in particular places and times. And if we can just start to organize around those pieces, then the idea of all of the things that we're talking about, both Nicole and I, that may seem and sound complex and difficult, become easier and more manageable, because we're capable of saying, well, where do I do that? When do I do that? Oh, okay. Now I've got the nexus of the action with the other vectors, which is place and time. And it becomes much easier. Where does this fit in organizing things? Think of the space and the time in which you place those things, or where those things become disorganized or unorganized in some way, shape, or form. And so we can start to think about these things when we start to just place them in the day. Where do I come to contact with, at the end of my day, all the pens are all over the place. Why? Well, it's because I don't have a pen holder. Well, the moment I get a pen holder, now every time I use my pen or my stylus or my whatever, I put it in the pen holder, right? It's very easy to think about, but we don't bring it to awareness. We don't bring it to that level of awareness all the time. put a little bit more there, a little bit more mise en place is created. And we do these little bits of mise en place until it's an orchestra and you're capable of really being in control and command of your world.
It's funny you mentioned that. I actually did a talk. I may have even mentioned this last year in my presentation about the ways in which we waste time doing things that are mindless. And so when I got old enough to need reading glasses, the bane of my existence currently, I discovered that I spent an inordinate amount of time finding my reading glasses, because if I was in the kitchen, they were in the office. If I were in the car, they were in my bag, and so on. And after noticing this and sort of doing an unconscious audit of the amount of time I spent doing that, I found out that you could buy glasses for $1 at the dollar store. So I went to the dollar store and I bought like 20 pairs of glasses. And even in my office now, I have multiple pairs of glasses because dollar glasses tend to break. And of course, you don't care since you spent $1 on them. But I have glasses on every surface in my house, on a holder in my car, in my bag. So I never needed to look for glasses again. Not so different than putting the pens back in the pen. Now, let's take a step back to look at the small business owner or the new entrepreneur, or people like all of us who are, I know you run a business, Ray, but many of us spend a lot of time on our thought leadership. So our own time is really important. How do you, because so I'm thinking, if I'm a small business leader, let's say I own a dry cleaning business and I spend a lot of time responding to customers, training my staff on how to do this or how to do that. These tasks really sound like I would need 27 hours in the day to do all of the things that I already know I have to do, the things that are going to come up that I don't know I'm going to have to do, the maintenance on whatever system I design, that is to say, whichever system I invent from scratch, because what I have right now is just reactive. What are the steps, both in stepping back from a project view, as you described, Nicole, so I'd like you to say something, and then for you to being able to look at things within systems, for example, using various platforms and software and calendaring, somehow reduce my experience of never being able to get everything done and having too much stuff to do.
Okay. Lots of really good stuff to unpack there. I'm going to work backwards a little bit. The concept of having too much stuff to do is one of the biggest challenges that we'll have, right? Think about your plate. We all have a full plate. Now, the question is, what's on your plate? If the things that are on your plate are things that drain your energy, make you feel that you're way out of your comfort zone and create stress, so you procrastinate and avoid it, or are things that you should rightfully be delegating to someone else, right? That full plate doesn't leave you room to do the things that you should be doing. So I always, especially if I'm working with an entrepreneur budding, or they're kind of, getting there, or a small business owner, one of the things I'm going to ask them is, well, let's lay out all of the things that are on your plate. And let's look at what are the things that are suitable for you to delegate to someone else. And so I love to bring them back to, what is the equivalent value of your time? If you were going to bill someone for doing that item, would you want to pay them your person hour? I don't want to use man hours, but your person hour rate for that item, right? And so that, again, for me, goes back to my advertising days. Like, we would be held to task to make sure that the right person was assigned to the right task level, because you had to be able to justify billing to a client, $250 for the partner rate for what really should have been a $50 task, right?
So you're talking about essentially assigning, that expression, it's above or below my pay grade. So you're saying, like, let's categorize pay grades and then figure out what tasks I'm doing that are below my pay grade and delegate them to somebody for whom they are the appropriate pay grade, and so forth.
Yeah. And so identifying that. And so one of the things I'll hear, folks will say, oh, but I'm just myself in business, or I'm a small business owner. There are incredible resources that are available to us to have folks do those things for us, or to help support us in creating systems that can automate some of the things that we need to do, so that we're not necessarily so hands-on. Once you can take some of those things off your plate, Then as you move up in your business, your leadership, then you have to now assign time for those other things that are important. If you're training your team, you have to look at now, how do I lead my team, as opposed to, am I the one that needs to be doing the button pushing on the customer service software, right? So it's about really thinking about what's on your plate, what you need to take off of your plate, and how do you bring other folks into the fold to assign and delegate tasks. So even a solopreneur can take advantage of someone else's energy and effort to address the needs that are in their business so that they can look at and spend time with some of those higher level things.
It's so interesting you say that. Like, one of my insights from this summit has been, and this is funny because all of my clients are startup founders or leaders, post revenue. So they are really busy and they all have VAs and I don't. And I've been attending the summit, noticing how much stuff I do that is well beneath my literal pay grade.
Yep.
And thinking, gosh, maybe it's time for me to pull the trigger on a VA. So that's been really useful. Ray, how do you help your clients begin to corral their experience of being overwhelmed and not being able to get to everything?
Sure. So the exercise I use is akin to, it's always the same speech, right? Which is, there's an organization called the International Association for Time Use Research, and I pay a lot of attention to the work that they do out there. These are researchers who are identifying what people are doing. They're cataloging what people do throughout their days. And what people tend to say is that I'm somehow time depraved, that I'm time scarce. Time scarcity is usually a factor of the fact that you are wasting lots of time. You are not recognizing the fact that there is time abundance usually in your schedule until you get to. So I always equate it to the 80-20 principle or the Pareto principle corollary for productivity. When we think about it, those of us who are in real mastery of our time and space, our space-time, we are likely to see a breakdown in the Pareto principle, right? Because now the things that I do are going to be more useful and more effective over time. But those, when we start, it's probably quite appropriate to say that 80% of your time is necessity and waste, and then 20% of your time is probably some form of highly effective, well-used time. And what we want to do is increase that till we get to that point of 80 or 90% of your time is really quite fascinating to watch people go through that phase. So I usually start with that, which is, you're probably wasting a lot of time, you just don't know it. So let's see what you're doing with your time. And we can assess a calendar, but we can also use time tracking technologies. There are tools that will just automatically what I consider passive tracking. We can put in passive tracking technology and watch what you're doing with your life, and then we can look at it and say, is this really? Can we take these things? Right? Can we take these things and put them together, and that'll create some buffer here? Or maybe you're doing the wrong things at the right things at the wrong time. And so maybe we group these things and put them into your biological prime time so that you're able to better, be more effective in the work that you're doing. Once we identify those.
So you're talking about doing a time audit, which frankly sounds like, if I were telling a small business entrepreneur to do that, would sound terrifying and intrusive. But but what you're identifying is the Pareto principle applied to us. And for sure, if you actually, I'm familiar with the studies you're talking about that have found that if you actually track what people do, they spend an inordinate of time thinking of what to do, surfing social media, trying to organize their email, responding to email, responding to phone calls, and so forth as they come in, rather than blocking them together so that they end up with big blocks of time. So the time audit is a really interesting idea. Now, I want to just ask about this, the IATUR that Trevor's pointing to. Apparently you mentioned it, Ray, and I was off in space and missed it. So can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so it's the International Association for Time Use Research, and these are researchers who go out there and help people log their time. And so this is not as onerous as you might think. Remember that our objective view of the world is always through the lens of our subjective reality. And so being able to track this stuff is really, really important and powerful. So my point in bringing it up is that there are people out there who are in essence giving us pretty definitive research on the fact that we think we are time depraved when we are in essence not. So once we get over that point, which most entrepreneurs come to me and they tell me there's this cultural phenomenon that somehow I need to work all hours of every day, and that's what tells I have to be a lone wolf, and that's the only way in which my business is going to be successful. My business has been profitable from day one. You know why? Because I made it profitable by managing my time effectively from the beginning.
Exactly.
I think it's all bunk, and I don't adhere to that. I want to live a wonderful, fulfilling life, and that may mean that I work more than you, or I may work less than you. But that has nothing. It's decoupled from the operations of the business. I'm either managing a business or the business is owning me, and so we have to flip that paradigm a la Gerber. But anyway, my point is that I then take them through developing hats. I always think about this because I'm a big fan of Dr. Edward de Bono and his work. Six thinking hats, and I just translated to like, what if we took all of the areas of your business or all the roles you have in your life? Maybe you're a homemaker, maybe you're a CEO, maybe you are a yoga instructor, maybe you are all of these various things in your personal and professional life, and we give those hats, and then we decide where and when those hats are operating, and we look at that from what I don't call it, Dr. Neil Fiore called it the unschedule, and I have adhered to the unschedule for many years. There's probably a video on YouTube I did some time ago about that with a template and whatnot, so you can go check that out. But the idea behind the unschedule is then we take our hats and we start placing into the calendar just shy of the things that are necessity, right? I have to eat, I have to take a shower, I have to go, walk the dog, those kinds of things. Just shy of that, we place the most priority items in what is our biological prime time. What is the best time of day for us to do that type of activity, that context of activity? So if I'm my own CFO, then I need to do my CFO time at a particular time every week. And once we block those pieces out, time starts to become much more easily managed. It's remarkable how business owners start to just shed all of that stress of like, oh, we have that customer service problem that's coupled with a billing issue, and I don't know when I'm supposed to deal with that. I have to deal with it right now. And I always say, if they're not dialing 911, it can wait. So, we really need to remember this fact. You can communicate with them. I hear you. I want to help you. I deal with all of these things on Thursday morning. It is Wednesday morning. I'll see you in 24 hours.
So what you're talking about is a couple things. One is setting boundaries with your clients, customers, or whomever is making demands of you. And then the second,
starting with yourself, boundaries with yourself.
And then managing the expectations of your clients or whomever is making demands of you, so that they can understand that you block time for specific things. Like one of the things I recommend my clients do is set up office hours. So, and this because most of my clients are in organizations in which demands are being made in multiple directions. And so if they schedule, say, office hours, or they corral everything to Thursday morning, that's the time when they handle that. And again, nobody's, getting surgery, so it should be okay. What I'd love to do, go ahead.
If I can add one thing to that, that's in a sense what Ray's talking about is you're building a delegation muscle. Right? You're identifying time windows that work for you, the best suited for that work, and you're delegating the work even to yourself at that time. And so that's a great way to start looking at which are the time blocks you love and which are the ones that you hate. And now that you've grouped all these tasks or this work together, it makes it easier to say, I don't really want to do that. I'm going to hand that off to this other person who's going to be responsible for that because I love playing over here in this time block. So that's another way to start building that time muscle.
Absolutely, on Nicole's point here, which is just really quickly on Nicole's point there, she's absolutely right. It's so important because as you start to put those blocks together, you're basically writing a job description, and you're capable of then saying, if I'm wearing the CEO hat, the COO hat, the CFO hat, no matter how big or small the business is, you've got those roles that are being managed. You're in essence writing the job description as you go. Even in your personal life, like I don't like making the meals in my house, so eventually I'm going to delegate that onto a meal planning company. It doesn't matter. Whatever the context is, you can use this method for then grouping together those pieces and saying, ultimately I shouldn't be doing this. I should be hiring someone to do that kind of stuff. So I'm right on point there, Nicole.
It's a really great point, because one of the great benefits we have in this day and age that people didn't have, let's say, back in the early 90s when I was working on time management, global team to do that, is we have all these different platforms, like, whether it's meal planning or it's auditing your time, or in my case, I use Otter to to tape, to transcribe all of my YouTube videos so that they become the platform for my articles. There's a lot of different opportunities out there if you go looking for them. And if you utilize people like Nicole and Ray and Francis, you will find resources you never knew. Now, what I'd like to do, first of all, I want to say to everybody who's watching in the future that we have captured all of the things that have been said in notes in the message board. So there are links in there. People have extrapolated from what's been said, and they're fantastic insights. So please do look at all of that. But what I want to do now is give each of you an opportunity to ask the other anything that you think is particularly salient or that you have questions about, because my questions are only mine. And I think we'd gain some more insight by doing that. So, Nicole, do you find yourself with any questions or particular areas of Ray's work or Ray's presentation here that you'd like to either expand on or ask him about?
Well, what I always love is kind of pulling it back to the bigger picture. So, Ray, while I know that in this summit, your focus, at least for this presentation, is Evernote, you do so much more. Right. And so when you're working with your clients, you do so much more. So one of the challenges that I always have with my clients, and I always love to pick other folks' brain on, is when it comes to resources and tools, especially ones that you specialize in, and you can, as I say, trick out the tool in so many different ways to make it, get up and make you breakfast if you need to.
Goldberg machine.
Right? Yet your clients may have resistance. What are your strategies for overcoming resistance to either adopting a tool or resource that can work so well from them, but they've got roadblocks and mindsets about that?
So I always meet clients where they're at, and we want to be able to invest in technology that's going to help, not hurt or hinder. And so what I will usually do is sit down and actually ask them, what technology do you use? And most actually don't recognize the fact that they use all kinds of technology. And when I say technology, a hammer and nail are technology, right? A wheel is technology, and we have very fancy wheels in the world.
Technology.
Right, exactly. So people tend to think about it, when I say technology, they think, bits, binary, and code. I mean all technology. And once we start to outline, okay, well, you take in meetings, these are the technologies you're using, lights to doorknobs to other things, all of a sudden they recognize that there's some automations that they could use in their world that will help resolve some of these problems, including asynchronous meetings or using transcription software like Otter that Ami was talking about. And so I try to set up a matrix in my own system to be able to understand what technologies they're using, and then I might make suggestions. And I'm keen to decide whether or not they are open to those suggestions. And then I play those cards slowly but surely, which is that repetition begets understanding. And so I may not start them on Zapier or IFT, right? But I may start them on, you seem to be typing a lot of information here. Did you know that your operating system actually has the ability to expand text based on any number of keystrokes that you make? Maybe let's use your internal operating system to be able to do a little bit of automation there. They're comfortable with that. Then I can then say, you know what? Yeah, we can use the words you type to actually trigger things that happen and so if they see success in one small area, we can then in concentric circles expand upon that. Then if they're super high tech and they really want to invest in everything, I pull them the absolute opposite way, because people who want to put in a lot of automation immediately are the ones who have the most problems, because they don't value the investment of their own effort. And so I want to make sure that what they're doing is understanding that just because you automate something doesn't mean you don't have to manage it. There's quality control and making sure that when an automation breaks, it creates a whole bunch of downstream problems. So we need to make sure that every automation makes sense. So I'm trying to buffer for both of those extremes. And then most of the people I meet are not in the middle. They're in one of those extremes. And so I'm trying to help them mediate and come toward that center. So I hope that helps kind of.
That's awesome.
I love it. Thank you.
That's really great. So in terms of that, let's take what your perspective is. And do you have any particular questions or things in Nicole's work that you think are particularly important to frame? Because Nicole and you are sort of coming at this from a macro versus a micro perspective. And I think there's a lot of synergy there.
Yeah, so I think what you're doing here is really fascinating to me in terms of bringing project management to the every person, and I think that's really really important. So from your perspective and from your talk, when you try to explain to people, there is this project management body of knowledge, and there's the Prince 2 waterfall systems, W.
Yeah.
Edward Deming, that's very high level, very academic, and potentially banal to people. What are some ways in which we can introduce project management models to folks that are not personal productivity management models while being approachable? I think it's so important that we figure out what are some tips there you might have for folks who can do that.
So language matters, right? You nailed it. You start throwing terms at them and they go crazy. And so I look at things like, you take scope management. They don't want to hear scope management. It's not a term that they're going to want to do. So it's like, well, what do you want to get done? What are the results that you're looking for, right? And so I'll make sure that I'm using the words that they're using in their everyday. I always like to try to understand what's the language of the client. Every organization I've done training for, everyone has their own acronym. Being based in the DC area now, it's like there's a letter and an acronym for everything. And so I try to understand what their language is and equate it. So I won't necessarily go to the process of explaining waterfall versus agile or even a scrum approach, but I'll say, what are your best practices when you work on your projects? Where do you see things falling apart when you're working with your team members? And then, okay, what if we tried this? And so I will more look at their approach to how they're working on a project. So, depending on the type of organization, the type of project that they're working on, they might not be ready for something that is more agile in nature. They're not a fast moving, organization. They take a long time to make their decisions.
Nicole, I need to stop you only because we're out of time.
No,
it just tells you how remarkable this conversation. It just tells you how great this conversation has been. And I know we could go on forever, and I wish we could. But I want to say to everybody listening that Nicole and Ray are going to be available throughout the day at various times in the conference hall. And so please look for them and pick their brains further, because both of them just have an enormous, really inquantifiable amount of wisdom to provide. Thank you both for being here. It's really just been great. And I know there's next things coming up, and Francis has more of a schedule to tell us. But unfortunately, we didn't have a full hour. We were only given 50 minutes, if you can imagine.
Break our
All
heart.
right. Thank you so much, Nicole.
It's been a joy sharing the space with you all.
All right, Francis, handing it over to you, my friend.
I'm actually going to hand it right back to you, because as things turn out, or guests are on the way here, and they'll be here at the bottom of the hour at 12:30.
Great. Actually, that's awesome, because I have 10 minutes more of questions to ask. I got cut off too. So what I'd really love to do now is ask each of you, what did I not ask you about? What did you not get to talk about here that you think is the most important thing? So first, Nicole, finish your thought as per Lyndon. Lyndon, thank you. And then we'll move on to that.
Great. So in a nutshell, when it comes to the whole, how do I approach project management with them? I use their language. I find out what habits they already have as a group, as an organization. When I see folks that are organizing or running their tasks in different manners, I would like to just get everyone, can I get you all in the same room somehow? Can I get you on this? And then I'll narrow it down. Can I get you on the same table so that we can have consistency in the way that they're approaching the work? So I'll try to use their language, and I'll try to equate it to the things that they're doing. And when you look at the 10 body of knowledge areas, right? Integration, scope management, schedule management, cost management, quality, resource, communications, risk, procurement, and stakeholder.
God, is there a mnemonic for that?
No, PMBOK, the project management body of knowledge areas, right? But when you look at the 10 separate areas, the reality is we are already in some way, shape, or form aware of or addressing that area in our day-to-day, in our work. And so it's finding out what they're looking at. When I talk about stakeholders, one client, their key stakeholders may be their ratepayers. For example, if I'm thinking of one particular client, they talk about their ratepayers and their board members, right? So I won't go in and say stakeholders. I'm going to pull their language into the conversation and say, how do you manage expectations for your ratepayers? How do you manage expectations for your board members, right? Quality management, we know what those words look like. So I really just try to get them thinking about, at the end of the day, what they need to accomplish in those areas, right? I'm not going in and teaching them project management strategies, from PMI, because they're not going to do it. But I want to help them look at how they can pull that best practice into their day-to-day to make sure they're thinking about these things when they're bringing a project together. And so they'll then have the right people at the table. And so one of the tools, if I can jump right in and you say, well, what are one of the ways that, one of the things I want people to know about? One of the freebies that I'm giving is a tool that I was introduced to, feels like 100 years ago, called RACI, right? It's the RACI project management system. I didn't come up with it. I can't claim credit for it, but it has saved my bacon a ton of times. And it's a way of thinking of your resources, both from the people standpoint, the time investment standpoint, and laying out what you're going to need to do in your project. And so I have a worksheet for folks that they can snag. And so I will use that RACI chart to help people think about how to apply project management principles to their workday. Who are the people that are responsible in that phase? Who are the people that are accountable or can approve things? Who are your subject matter experts that you have to consult, and who do you need to keep informed? And so if I can get them thinking that way and lay out all the different phases of their projects and attach a schedule to it, then I'm happy. And that makes a big difference. So that would be one of the things that I would say, if folks really want to kind of get comfortable applying these principles, but doing it in a non-scary way, the RACI chart's a great way to start.
Thank you so much. I know, because I knew I would have left out something important.
Okay.
And Ray, what is it that hasn't been said here that you think is really important and that people should know?
Oh, goodness. It's not as difficult as it seems. I know that it so many times seems difficult, but it's actually complex. And so when we, again, going back to that whole idea of how to deal with things that seem amorphous, what we just need to do is to break things down into their elements. And the more elemental, the more likely we are capable of adding like elements together and creating a greater sense of ease as it relates to process. It was said in the comments, and I think this is really important to bring back, to say that what we need to understand is that we live in a system of systems. And when we don't think about things in terms of systems, bringing ourselves to that level of awareness about the systems around us, right? I always joke that, creative professionals come to me and say, I don't like the structure. I don't like the, whatever. And while it's casual to joke about it, the reality is that they have gravity. They live in a solar system. They live in the universe. We all are bounded by the same laws, of physics. We need to remember that even when we don't want structure, we don't believe there is structure involved. And so bringing awareness to the structure then gives us the ability to harness that structure in those ways. So this is the other part that I frequently find a problem with, and I'll say in these closing moments, there is no such thing as a broken person. What it is a necessity to find better systems to support you. When you find a problem, a challenge, you just need a system to support you. And when you don't have a system, you then turn to mythology to solve that problem. It is not that you are broken or that you have some kind of problem that can't be fixed. It's just that you need a better system to solve. And all of the talks that I've seen throughout the summit, and all of Nicole and what she's trying to do here, what we're trying to do is just give you approaches to build systems that will help support you be more productive. It is kind of building the bridge as you're walking over it, but you can do it. And I really believe that there's just a system of systems that we need to just understand to support us in our productivity.
I love what both of you have said. And one of the things that occurs to me as I listen to you is that people need to actually look at things from two perspectives. On the one side, you need to deconstruct what it is that you do so that you understand what these component parts are, as Ray said, so you know exactly what you're doing and how you're spending your time. And then secondly, you need to step back and look at things from a larger perspective so that you can see what the overall project is you want to do. And then finally, I think this idea of systems within systems is that there are two things there. One is the systems that pre-exist you, right? The number of hours in the day, the way that the solar system works, your own internal chronography and so forth, chronology, your own sense of time. And then you have to be able to construct systems that are compatible with your way of working and with the things you want to accomplish.
Sure.
Does that kind of match what you both think that, because I want to make sure that we covered all. And by the way, again, so much stuff in the chat. We can't possibly get to all of it, but we have so much wisdom that is both synergistic and ancillary to what's been said here. Really go back and read it. But do you guys see in your own work, the ability to, I mean, I'll tell you what, one of the things I face is that it's not so much that entrepreneurs resist the systems, is that they're actually committed to their chaos and their overwhelm. How do you interrupt that? The person who has actually attached to their own character that busyness, it's like it's somehow a badge of honor.
Yeah.
How do you interrupt that to get them to use systems and reduce that chaos so that they can be more effective in their work rather than sort of virtue signaling their busyness?
That comes back to mindset, and that's why in my book, The Full Plate Detox, I dig into that section about your energy drains. And so the habit blocking session is about those energy drains. What are those mindsets that you have in place, such as an entrepreneur thinking that they have to constantly be busy, and they confuse busyness with accomplishment, right? And so I want to pull them back again and say, what's your vision? What does your real vision of success look like? And then I'm going to ask them honestly.
You have 14 seconds and I need to get
behavior get me there.
Ray, what can you say in 10 seconds about this?
Oh gosh, I couldn't say anything in less than 10 seconds. I would say that just look for us in the sessions. We'll talk.
Okay, great. Thank you all again. I know Francis is coming back because he gave me that timer to count down. My days in radio make that relatively natural for me. Francis, thank you for the extra 10 minutes, and I will hand it back to you with my great gratitude to both of you.
Thank you, Ami.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you, Ami.
Honored to
Thank
share
you, Ray.
with you.
Same here.
Thank you so much, Nicole, Ray, and Ami, for an awesome, stimulating session. Let me stop the recording at the moment, and then I'll ask Ami if you could turn off your microphone and camera, and we're going to make a transition. I'm going to bring up the next session, and Ray will do the introduction. So all I'll do is just bring folks up. So I'm going to bring up Micah, Hojun, and Huxley. Guys, just click to accept the microphone and camera. Hi, Hojun.
Hey there, how you doing?
Good.
Good to finally meet you, Francis.
Good to finally meet you. Hi, Huxley. Hi, Micah.
Hello.
Hello.
Great. So I'm going to come off the stage, and Ray, I'm going to hand over to you.
Great. Thank you, Francis. Welcome, everybody, to this session where we'll be talking to the Condution team. I'm Ray Sidney Smith, and I'm really pleased to bring here up on stage the Condution team. So Condution is a task management app. You guys can correct me if I get any of the monikers, the way in which we do this. But Condution is an open source project that was developed by the Condution team. We're going to kind of discuss that a little bit today. But I have here Micah Robinson. He's the operations and marketing lead. He's also a hobbyist 3D animator and a media producer. Welcome, Micah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have Hojun Jack Liu. I'm going to call you Jack. And development and team lead. He's also a fountain pen enthusiast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man after my own heart there with the fountain pens. And then Huxley Marvitt, user experience and brand lead. And he likes climbing rocks. Welcome, Huxley.
Thank you.
Great. Welcome to the panel. I'm really looking forward to kind of diving into some of this discussion here. And what I wanted to start off with like, why did you develop Conducian? What was the impetus for being able to do this? And then we can start the discussion going forward in terms of really the foundations and the principles behind really the company that is Conducian, the project, I suppose, that is Conducian. But why did you decide to build a task management app of all things?
Well, something that we started with was sort of a need, right? We did not start by saying, oh, we have this sort of new solution first and sort of work backwards. We started with a need of, honestly, myself and a few friends of mine who was like, we tried basically everything on the market, right? From anywhere from like To-Do to Todoist to even things like OmniFocus, which promises to be very customizable. But I really never found what exactly I need. And, with some programming skills and a band of people, interested in this type of development work, we just decided to, take the matters in our own hands and just build an app that works for us. And turns out thousands of people around the world like it too. So.
Fantastic. And so you brought together this team of developers to build it, and what were the kind of the guiding principles for being able to develop it? I know I hear a little bit of getting things done in your video, so obviously you're talking a little bit about a specific methodology, but what was the kind of the set of principles, the axioms that you chose to say, okay, we're going to build this, we're going to be able to build it for doing these things? What were those points that you decided to choose?
Yeah, so there were a couple of things, both on the more of the app side and on the productivity side. Like you said, it was modeled after after GTD, so you're going to see a lot of those same kind of features and things that you would normally have in an app like OmniFocus. But of course, because we built it, at least from the start, with our productivity systems in mind, there are a few distinct changes, and I think we'll talk more about that in our video. But on the app side and kind of the values, some of the most important things to us were having a free and open source app, which basically means free. Obviously, it doesn't cost anything. And open source means that our source code is online for anyone to use or change. And that, that gets more into kind of the development side and the ideals there. But essentially, we want to help foster trust and on to like basically another point, help foster a community around the app, which is something that has been really helpful. So we have a lot of users who engage with us on a daily basis about things from bug reports to feature requests to helping with translations, for example. So kind of these ideals all come together in creating a really good community of people from GTD enthusiasts to app enthusiasts to people who just need a good task manager.
Yeah, so I think it's really important for folks to recognize free open source software. Free is a licensing structure, and so no cost does not necessarily mean free. You guys have chosen to make it a no cost application, and that's really awesome. But if anybody's interested in learning about the free open source software movement, you can go to like Free Software Foundation and lots of other folks who are doing great work in that space. And so wonderful, thank you, Micah. And so. Jack, did you want to jump in there?
No, I'm just saying free, as we usually say, it's like free as in beer and also free as in freedom. So it's you can get the software for free. It's online, and also we believe that having access to task management is sort of a fundamental human right, may be a little bit far, but saying like having access to task management and high quality task management is something that everybody should have access to. And frankly, things like OmniFocus, it's great for everyone, including students, but most students could just not afford it. And I couldn't until I saved up for this explicit purpose, which is frankly not very good.
Yeah, fantastic. And I happen to be a big FOSS supporter, so I love the idea of having software that is being developed for the future. Was this something that you guys discussed at length regarding? Because there are a lot of folks out there that believe that FOSS is the future. I think I happen to be one of those people. But there are a lot of folks out there who believe that proprietary software is still the most viable solution for going out there. You're high school students, I believe, right? You're all high school students still, and so you're not necessarily living on your own and supporting yourself with this software. But I'm curious, what were the discussions that were had about the concept of creating a free application that was accessible to, in your case, probably a lot of students, because you know a lot of students and you know a lot of people around the world who are using this for studying. What were your thoughts around the idea of making this free as opposed to charging a cost for it, even if it were free licensing, that is free open source software licensing? You could still charge a cost to this, even if it was nominal. What were some of those discussions you had around that?
Well, we started this app just because we needed an app to help us, right? We had this need and we just simply created it to meet that need. We're not here to make money, right? That was never the goal. It was just to make something that we could use. And it turns out a bunch of other people would like to use as well. Yes, we do have a Patreon, so that supports all of our databasing costs and whatnot. So we really don't need the extra money, right? We're just here and we're the best thing we can. It wasn't conversations when we started like, hey, should we make this open source? Should we try to get money out of this? It was more like, we're just going to start making something. And turns out people liked it. So we started creating it more for everyone.
I really appreciate that. I love that idea of being able to have a Patreon-supported application and doing something good. Moving fast and breaking things. At your age is still a viable option, and so that's fantastic. What makes Conducian then different than OmniFocus? You kind of alluded to it so far, but I'm curious. How is Conducian different, other than now we've talked about FOSS, we've talked about the free open source licensing functions? This is obviously a fairly new application, so its maturity is a little bit lower than some of these other applications, but you're working on a lot of the features here. Tell me a little bit about what's the differentiator? What's in the business world, we call that a unique selling proposition, but what makes you different than all the other task managers out there on the market?
Well, there's really two things, right? There is the feature question and there's the values question. And let's just start with the values question because it kind of transitions nicely from where we started before. Being open source and being community driven means that even with a large community, we have seen big open source apps, say Android or Emacs or Vim, take community feedback very seriously. And we also take community feedback extremely seriously, in that we can have feature requests through GitHub, which is the source code management platform. We can have people talk to us on our actually work Discord. Yes, kids, we use Discord as sort of these poppies and these things. But we make this act available to everyone so that everyone could sort of have their bite at it too. Even if they may not know software development, they could contribute us great ideas and we can leverage that and make it available for the whole community. That's sort of on the value side of it. But on the feature side, we believe we have a few differentiators from even OmniFocus. For instance, that idea, I don't know if the video was played, but tag weights is something that that one is one of the things that we started sort of thinking about as we're beginning to build the app, which is that I personally don't feel like the weighting priority system in any app actually works very well. OmniFocus has like a mishmash between that whole expected time length thing and Todoist has like number of weights thing and like how priority it is, but that is not customizable enough for me, right? What I wanted was a fully customizable weighting system and priority system, and I think Tag Weights offers that. In addition, we have this thing called workspaces, which are basically shareable workspace. So we can just give you a link, and then you can, without having an account, kind of go in and sort of the Google Docs of task management. And that's definitely a feature differentiator as well.
Yeah, and I'm actually sending to the chat. Workspaces can be publicly shared. So you can actually click on the link I just sent to the chat, and without an account, without anything, just check out Conducian and and poke around a little bit.
Fantastic. So the idea of tag weighting is very interesting. Let's dive into some of these features then and start with tag weighting. What the heck is tag weighting, Jack? And tell me a little bit about what went into thinking through the process of someone applying what in its essence effort to a particular action I'm presuming. Correct me if I'm wrong, and then explain what went into the development of tag weighting.
So tag weights are a sort of very flexible way of making tags sort of heavier and lighter. And the way that we do that is by assigning weights to tags. So basically, each tag has a number that is its weight. For instance, a tag that may require a lot of more of your energy is sort of which is called heavy, right? For instance, you have synthesis, right? Creative work. That's sort of a heavier weighted tag. And you can assign a numerical weight, and you can assign multiple tags to a single task, and meaning that the weights of the tags multiply to contribute to the weight of the task. So in this way, you can basically think about it as sort of a co-influencing system whereby if and Zach's example in the video was that if you had like a menial task that sort of made your normal task even heavier, that may be like a 1.5 times a 2 type of situation, whereby one thing augments the difficulty of another thing. Right. And in this way, there's actually a few use cases. First, you can model things after GTD contexts, whereby things that are just, you can just tag things directly and say like working at a gym is probably less effective than working at, say, Starbucks. But I have to work at a gym for this context. And so I have to weight it higher or lower. And so you can use weights to sort of as an indicator of ability to do something or sort of effectiveness. Or you can use weights as priorities. So basically, you can have the important task tag, which has a higher weight, or maybe a less important task, which has a lower or less than 1 weight, so like a weight of 0.5, right? And what happens is that you could change tasks and sort of modulate them based on that priority system as well. So it's really a flexible system for us to do sort of this idea of both priority, context, and also sort of the heaviness and efficiency of a task. And finally, weights could be shown in a heat map in our calendar view and our date picker, which means when you put a task to a certain date, you can already know how heavy that date is. So when you're scheduling things, it's much easier to balance your week out in terms of difficulty.
So give me some further thought here, though. If you have I noticed the calendar feature, and I was actually quite fascinated by this. So you have a calendar feature. This is a view of your tasks. Is this managing also your everyday meetings and events, or is it limited to just the tasks?
Yeah. So right now it is its own kind of built into Conducian. So it doesn't it doesn't sync with your Google or Apple calendars, although that is something we're working on. I think, like we were saying, community driven. If people want something where we can import things from, a Google Calendar, for example, and they'll show up there, that's definitely something that is doable and something that
Nextcloud.
Yes. But yeah, so right now it's isolated to just your tasks on Conducian.
Fantastic. And I like this idea of tag weighting. For those of you who are not aware, Getting Things Done has a fourfold model for choosing action for basically in the engaging phase. And so contexts, I tend to think about this a little bit differently, and I'm curious how you're going to manage this in the tag weighting feature going forward. But in essence, when we think about context, we're really thinking first about resource limitation, and then we start to think about other pieces, energy available, time available, then energy available, and then what David Allen calls intuition. Again, I tend to redefine intuition for most people as being past experience informing our present decisions. And so when we think about intuition as being something truly methodological, as opposed to being something that is kind of maybe woo-woo or mythical in essence, we start to see tag weighting as something that is both practical and useful to us in this way. And in the tool, I'm guessing you're capable of creating as many different tag weights as you want, and then defining the appropriateness of those weights or the context in which you're creating. What's that customizability look like?
Yeah, so basically we have the way it's structured, and the way a lot of things with Conducian are structured is so that you can really design your own system. So it's the tag weights. I'm not sure if I can share my screen and actually show you what that looks like. I'll do that in a sec. But essentially, the tag weights you can set any number for them. And so this can be things like, say something is a 2, which, because the tag weights are multiplicative, it makes things twice as hard. So for example, if it's a task that you can maybe only do on your phone, it might be twice as hard to write something out on your phone or do some sort of task. And then you can also have a tag weight that is a decimal. So you can say something gets a lot easier because of this specific tag. And those all are fully customizable, and they multiply together to create, like Jack was saying, a task weight, which is essentially how difficult or how heavy a certain task is. And it's all relative compared to the other tasks, because they're, of course, using the same tags.
What's really cool is that we also have traditional sort of OmniFocus, I guess, inspired perspectives, but it's much more flexible in that you can filter by things like tag weights. So then you can have traditional context, a la GTD, but you can also have sort of parameter-based filtering for like the weighting of the task. So you can really narrow down your next action list based on sort of your weight as well.
Yeah, and so you can see here really quickly, this is what it looks like. This is our tags manager. You can see the task name, and then here you can choose your task weight. So right now it's set to a 1. Change that, for example, to a 3, and maybe change a focus to a 0.5. And if, for example, a task had both of these, your final task weight would be a 1.5.
Right, because it would be multiplying the 3 times 0.5.
Yep.
Fantastic, fantastic. So staying here, I'm still very curious about tag weighting here, because I think this is going to be both useful and confusing for a lot of folks. And so I want people to get a good idea about what you're trying to do here, which is to help people understand the effort involved, and you're using skeuomorphism here, which is basically physical effort, and the image of the literal weight, and picking up something for that. What are the general types of weights that you see people, now that you have thousands of users in the system? What are the general weights that you're seeing people apply to different types of activities?
I want to stress, first of all, that we can't see anything. We have a very strict protocol in terms of data protection. So of course, we're not going to see what other people are doing. But from what I've personally heard from users, there is a few different things, right? There is the obviously the difficulty that you talked about, so there's just the physical effort required to do something. But then there is also this other sense of tag weight, which is sort of a priority system. I talked about this as well, which is that people, instead of saying, oh, it is hard to do this thing, it could be a very easy task. It could be something that's like barely crossed that 2-minute limit for inbox sorting. It could be like a very, very easy task, but it's a thing that's like your boss tells you must do this, or you lose your job or something like that, right? So then you have a higher, very, very high weight to that. And but in that sense, you can have perspectives that filter for certain weights across contexts, which means that you may say have a perspective that's a do this right now. It's kind of like inbox sorting, but more than 2 minutes perspective, just for the very important tasks. And then you have more traditional perspectives, or sort of like interest-based or mood-based or difficulty-based perspectives after that. So in this way, there is that whole importance thing. And lastly, something I see not a lot of people use, but I found really, really interesting, is this idea of like time. I know some tasks are not super difficult, but they take a long time to do. And in this way, what happens is you can use our calendar view and combine to that to create a really, really powerful thing, whereby you can see not how heavy a day is, but how empty that day is. So in terms of time, literal time emptiness, which means you can schedule like recreational events or meetings based on that heat map. And you can schedule other things when you're picking a task, because our heat map is built into the day picker. You can see when to sort future things. So there's just a few ideas of where to throw tag weights, but really the sheer customizability of tag weights means that not even GTD, you can just throw that completely out the window and just do whatever you want, and it will be customizable and suitable for what your needs are.
Fantastic, fantastic. I want to move us forward then into the concept of perspectives. And those of you who are in the chat, feel free to ask questions. I've got lots of topics to talk to these gentlemen about, but feel free to throw questions in there, and we can cover those as well. I want to turn to you, Huxley, and talk about perspectives. Now, perspectives are potentially a new thing to most people who are not using OmniFocus. So if you can kind of explain in what OmniFocus perspectives are, and then how they are different in Conducian, and why you chose to use that terminology, perhaps, and how they work.
Perspectives are essentially things that you can use to filter for your different tasks, right? So you can assign these tags that we were talking about to your tasks, and then you can generate a perspective, which allows you to see these are all the tasks that meet these certain criteria. For example, I could say I want to see all the tasks that I have to do by this date. Or you can say I want to see all the tasks that require creative work, or all the tasks that have a tag weight above X, right? And what this allows you to do is it allows you to sort of gain an understanding of exactly what needs to be done when. As for how we differ to OmniFocus, one of our design philosophies is that we create simple systems with which you can create complex things, right? So the idea is that we have a perspective syntax, which allows you to do this filtering. And it can be anything from as simple as clicking a button to say, I want to see all the tasks that are in this project, and this project, to saying things like, I only want to see tasks that are in this project, but don't have this tag, which are available to me now, which, have a tag weight of X, right? You can do all these complex things, but you can also do all these super simple things. And that's what we did from OmniFocus, right? We are available to everybody, and we still allow you to have that customizability if you want to go all the way.
Fantastic. I think that the idea here is I use Remember the Milk. I'm a heavy Remember the Milk user, and maybe I've been playing around with Conducian because obviously I knew I was going to be talking to you gentlemen. But my primary tool is Remember the Milk, and I use smart lists, and it has this capability of looking at the various fields within the system and helping me to manifest a saved search that will then show those kinds of items. And that seems to sound like what perspectives are in Conducian. And what were the things that you thought were maybe missing in elements, fields, or maybe potentially what could be used in terms of perspectives outside of its typical format of, okay, I want to see a grouping of tasks that are across potentially multiple lists or in different areas. What were some of those areas that you think about when it comes to perspectives for people to be able to fully utilize Conducian in that way? Who wants to tackle that?
I guess I can. So I think, like we were talking about, perspectives are the great thing about Conducian perspectives is they are completely customizable. So if you wanted, you could take it full GTD. You could take it exactly like OmniFocus does. But the great thing is it allows flexibility, and that flexibility allows for new ideas and new concepts to kind of come into your system. And so that can be things like, and this is kind of the big example in what we talked about in our video, your kind of emotion and your ability to do a certain task. So you can create a perspective that is just for, hey, this is the time, it's after work, I'm watching TV, and this is something I can do then, right? Low weight tasks, low important tasks, things you can get done quickly and low stress. You can create perspectives for things like, this is something that's going to take all of my focus and all of my energy. This is like after I've had a break, this is after when I'm mentally ready to do something larger. And so this is just one more example. The great thing is perspectives let you choose whatever this is. So you can create a perspective for more traditional GTD for if you're with a person, obviously not as relevant in this day and age, but you can create perspectives for if you have access to, maybe your work server and files, at work. You can really do anything with perspectives, and you're not limited to GTD or to like a certain philosophy, and that's what we are going for with Conducian.
So you can do things like, I want to see everything that's overdue with my spouse or partner, and you can look at things like, what am I going to be doing today? And these are the heavy tasks, the more difficult tasks that I want to do generally in life. And maybe you have a someday list or a someday maybe list in the GTD lingo, and you want to have a someday maybe list across many different lists, and you want to search and surface those together, so you can group them and slice and dice your tasks together that way. That's great.
Yeah, just want to follow up on that. I think what separates us, it's like one of my early frustrations with the idea of perspectives in OmniFocus was that they don't allow granularity in terms of due dates. OmniFocus is basically like, there are a few other things, but like it's a glorified filters for projects and tags. And they don't care about the granularity of dates or numerics, right? For instance, waiting, right? They don't have waiting. But also, even if I try to do something like, I want tasks that take like 7 minutes or longer, right? I used to use that minute thing as my waiting system, and they don't allow that. They only have like 3 slots, which is like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and that's about it, right? And what was great is that we are more flexible than that. We have, not to sound super scary, we have a perspective builder, which is the simple OmniFocus, a la OmniFocus, choose these tags and just get on with your day type of perspective building. But also there is the perspective editor, which means we have this sort of no programming experience needed, but there's sort of a scripting system where you can sort of use different tags in this sort of arrange them by whatever you want in sort of just a linear fashion, and it will process it from left to right and get all of these really cool things like arbitrary date values, right? We can have, say, this, I want to filter for things that are like this tag, this project, whose due date is smaller than 1 month after this date, which is much more flexible than OmniFocus perspectives.
And is this all Boolean search? What's the kind of search method you're using when you're building out? I know I'm getting a little geeky here, but
I sort of implemented this. It is the syntax is processed by something called regex, sort of regular expressions. And after that, the search, we actually, in the new backend, in the old backend is a spaghetti monster, but in the new backend, we're leveraging something called a binary search tree. So what happens is, which is basically like, you have a tree that shows sort of things that are more than this date will kind of go on the right, and less than this date will go on the left. And not to get super programming lingo, that means that indexing anything will take log base 2 of n time, meaning that you're able to traverse the list very quickly just by going down, oh, it's more than that, it's more than that, more than that, less than that, more than that, and then sort of just zip through the whole database very, very quickly. And this is why we can build these really flexible tools by reasonably simple effort.
So a logarithmic tree-based process that's finding things that you need. Great, wonderful. That's really cool. All right, so we go from the individual task weighting to the idea of then being able to group like tasks together. Then we want to be able to group entire places together and what you call workspaces. And Micah, you shared a link to an open workspace. Can you talk to us a little bit, Micah, about what workspaces are? How do you define a workspace, and how does it work? What are kind of the features that make a workspace a workspace?
Yeah, so workspaces are our solution to task sharing, and so this has been something that for a lot of people has been the downfall of their productivity systems, because like it's great, it has everything I need, except I can't use it with other people. And the thing is your productivity and your work is not, for some people it is, but for most people, it's not just your own. You're working with teams, you're working with your partner, you're working with people on these projects, and you need to be able to have one place where you can see and view and handle all of your tasks. And so a workspace in Conducian is essentially it's akin to having a shared account, but without the hassle of a shared account. So when you create a workspace, you're creating basically a new instance of Conducian. And within that, you can, like we did, you can have a publicly accessible link, kind of like a Google Docs. You can share it with people, or you can share it directly with people by adding them, adding their Conducian email account, and that way it keeps it private. So that's what workspaces are generally. It has all of the same features. You can create workspace specific perspectives, so you can do things for a specific person. Like if you have one of your team members, or you might have a perspective for each of your team members that just filters by what are the tasks they can do. So internally, we use it, tags for the team member's name as well as their role. So we might have front-end work or user support work, and our perspectives filter for that. You can also have like condition projects. So things like, a back-end project or front-end project or, advertising project. And the one other key feature is task delegation. And this is a really cool part, because you can, within a task, and you can check it out in the workspace, there is a section for email, and you can add someone's email, and what it'll do is it will add that task to their personal condition. It'll show up in their home screen, so they don't even have to necessarily check these workspaces. It shows up what they have to do, and it's highlighted blue so that you know it's delegated. And so in this way, I can, as a boss or as a team lead, I can go through, create perspectives and projects and work on tasks, and then take them and actually assign them to specific people. So you don't even have to follow up in people and say, hey, can you check your perspective? Can you check back in on our workspace? You can just send it directly to them.
So when your teachers send you assignments, you can't say that you didn't get it, because it's going to be in your system, huh?
Right in your condition, yeah.
And also, just add on to that, one more thing that's great, had this thing of like when you delegate it to someone, it sort of shows up in your personal condition in the inbox. It doesn't show up in a dedicated delegation page. And what's excellent about that is that you can have arbitrary taggings or project sorting based on what works for you. And two things that are synced together is only due dates and completion. That means basically you can evaluate what it is like to actually work on that task, and the others could only, it doesn't influence. You don't have to be using your work system in terms of how they organize it in their project structure. They can organize it in the workspace